I think the Vision Pro is almost certainly the most expensive device per minute used in history, right? Because you think about it, like we all bought them. They cost $3,000.
Okay, but why? Let's explore this in brief. Why? Did we just want to believe? Are we stupid? What happened? Why, hello, friends. Welcome to another week of More or Less with the quad. It's been a while since it's just been the four of us.
Yeah.
How's it going?
2 weeks of guests. Good to see you guys.
We should thank all the listeners who really tuned in for our Vinod and Elon episodes. I think it's a resounding vote for continued guests on the pod. So we will love, not that we're not sufficient, but...
Well, we'll see who sticks around for a quad episode. A lot of people show up for an Elon or a Vinod, but what about just us?
Well, this is a very special episode, Sam. And so we coming off the highs of a guest episode, we had to deliver something good to you guys. And last week was our 52nd episode, which makes it an excellent time to do something we don't do enough, which is to look back at where we were wrong. We can talk about where we're right too. Somehow I think we'll dwell on that. But it's been a pretty consequential year in technology. So I was kind of hoping that we could go back to the early days of Threads, the anticipation of the Vision Pro, all our venture capital predictions, and kind of take stock of where we're at. So how does that sound to you guys?
I think that sounds good. And lo and behold, I actually found an AI tool that could help summarize our last year of podcasts and tell us some of the thematics that we've been discussing on More or Less. And in particular, the debates we've been having, the more or less conversations. So,
which is great because the idea of a human being needing to listen to 52 hours of us bullshitting for the 4 points, this is exactly what AI is for.
I agree.
I think it's 12. It's more than 4. Britt, because the listeners will want to know, which AI tool did you use for such an exercise?
Well, first of all, there aren't that many good AI tools that can do this. So I think this is a good startup opportunity for anyone out there. The one I did find is called snipped.com, SNIPD. And they say, unlock the knowledge in podcast, highlight, take notes, and summarize your favorite podcast using AI. And
I will circumcise you.
I do think, I love the Huberman podcast, but it is sometimes 3 hours long. I can understand why you would want to just summarize that. Our podcast, I don't think you want to summarize. You definitely should listen to the whole thing. However, I was able to get some of the summaries pulled up quickly. And yeah, we've got about 12 core debates we've had over the last year that we can talk through today.
12's a lot. Are there like 3?
Okay, but I will include More or Less Sam topless as the final bonus debate if we have to cut it down.
Shirts are overrated.
Okay, well, how about this? How about we each pick one?
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'm so into gimmicks, guys. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm going to pick, I'm playing to my ego here, but I'm going to pick the More or Less debate around IPOs. And we did see that IPOs have notably increased.
From 0 to 1?
In the first half of 2023
I knew this
to the
was
first half of 2024.
You mean your one fake IPO where you took an already IPO'd company and re-IPO'd it? Is that what you mean?
Sam, it's not a fake IPO. Okay. We'll share the data and then we'll crush the argument.
The data is that we are already up 23% year over year.
Let's talk raw numbers.
Raw numbers. I use GPT, so sorry if this is fake news. So we had 88 IPOs the first half of this year and 72 during the same period in 2023. Notably, the size of the deals are also much larger. And then can I just tag along the M&A market is up as well. So that's up about 30% year over year in the first half of the year in 2024. And also the deal value is up. They actually gave you numbers on deal value for this one, 535 billion versus 412 billion from the first half of 2023.
Even I will admit that the venture world is not as dead as it was a year ago. However, I think what you're really seeing here across the boards, which actually is good, is cleaning house and capitulation. So you're seeing more businesses just fold, which is great. The number of calls I've gotten from founders being like, we're done. And I'm like, I respect that. You could have been done a year ago. Is pretty high, right? I think it's also true that there's a bunch of M&A, which is that we're done, right? And like you just fold it in and move on. And then I do think on the IPOs that it was the let's hold out for like the right market timing, and we're like, fuck it, let's just go public and be done. So I actually think there's a nice cleaning of house going on across the boards. Whether you consider that super great or just like natural pruning, I think either is fine. But I will admit it's not as dead as it was a year ago.
It's showing signs of life, but I mean, we all talk to a lot of bankers, a lot of venture capitalists, and the big context is like, what are the exit paths going to be given fundamental changes in the IPO market? And that doesn't mean that companies can't IPO, but at our private capital summit, Philippe Lafont said you had to be 10 billion in size. There's a lot of talk about how ETFs have fundamentally changed it. And you still have major companies like Databricks that just like can't go out. So I think, it's relative, right? Is it as slow as it was a year ago? Absolutely not. But it's not like a floodgate mentality either, which at times the IPO market kind of has been, and we're still way down below historical levels.
I agree with you, but I also think one thing we've debated on this pod is AI companies being able to IPO. And so I said, what are the top 5 biggest technology M&A deals in the US from the first half of this year? And they range in value from 7 billion to 35 billion. 4 of the 5 are AI related deals. And so I do think just continuing to highlight that AI companies can get acquired and are getting acquired and are sort of continuing to enhance some of these incumbent, like Hewlett Packard.
Look, here's what's going on.
It depends, right? Inflection collapsed. Yeah.
The entire story of, I would argue, technically, this is like kind of like we're arguing about pennies here. Like the story of the last year is obviously the $3 trillion companies, right? Like the daily move in NVIDIA is larger than the entire IPO of all the companies that we're talking about. The story is about the head. The story is not about, like, no one cares about, even like a Reddit IPO. It's like, who cares? It's tiny. And so the entire thing is about the head. And the thing about the AI story is great is like, I just think the reality is the numbers are so big and people are just playing YOLO. Let's see what happens. That like, sure, it's happening, but it's not happening for like good fundamental business reasons. It's happening because why the fuck not, right? In a lot of cases on the acquisitions, all this type of stuff. People are playing this like YOLO game because AI might be a big deal, right? Even though people haven't figured out the product yet. And that's kind of what's going on. So I guess that's kind of my whole more on the IPO market, less is like, it just feels so irrelevant right now, right, to the overall narrative of what's going on.
Dave, any thoughts?
I don't know if I have anything to add.
Whose side do you take here, Dave? Come on, Dave.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think Sam's point is good. It's interesting. Like, I was thinking about this last pod, but a lot of our positions can come in either from the head or the tail, or I guess from the head and then the startup side, right? And on the startup side, we want to be optimistic that the pathways to liquidity are still there, that IPOs are possible, despite the 2010s kind of telling us a story, which we've talked about many times, that it's easy to become a unicorn, but it's not easy to become liquid and actually make it into the market and, become a going concern that's actually continues to be a good business after you get into the public market. And Sam's also right that on the side of the big $1 trillion companies, the sheer scale is so far beyond what any of us are talking about in terms of the everyday narrative of what's going on in Silicon Valley, that it's almost hard to comprehend. And I don't think we actually talk about it that much in that way. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll go back to Britt was sharing an article with me earlier, which is the rise of the Silicon Valley small business, which is a great essay that somebody published. I haven't finished reading it, but Sam, I know you've been pushing that narrative a lot, which is find your own path to building a great cash flowing business so that you have all the option value in the world at the downstream side of your capital raises. You can choose to raise capital or not, rather than having to think about this glorious world of IPOs. And as long as interest rates are high, I think that's what the world's going to look like for a pretty long time to come. So,
Oh, cute. This was published on Every. I'm an investor in this. Yeah, look, I mean, Dave, just to like riff on you for a second. Amen. To me, like there's like the world of like startups is actually completely fascinating right now. They just look very different than these like IPO aspiring $10 billion companies. There's just so many good companies to start and mess around with, and even opportunities on the product side from AI, which even I've started to mess around with some products and what you actually can do with it. You're like, ooh, that's not $1 billion company. It's not 100 billion. It's just not, right? But I kind of want to build it.
Yeah, it's okay.
I kind of want to build it. And by the way, I can make a lot of money building it because it's like so. And so to me, that's the real story is like bifurcation. Where like we have to stop talking about startups on this like chug IPO, late stage capital, blah blah story. You're just like, look, there's a few $1 trillion platforms. You want to know the story of the public markets or things like that. All that matters is those companies. Like it's just completely irrelevant what any small company does, right? And then there's the like, oh my God, if you're an entrepreneur or a builder, there's so many great ways to build really great companies and own them and make a lot of money. And then liquidity is a totally different story in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and there's even this other story playing out, which Sam, I know you're aware of, but there's quite a lot of companies that are trying to come off of the public market right now. And I don't know what you call that. I guess just
delisting.
They're delisting.
But they're going private. And, there was a lot of this like SPAC stuff and people going public that shouldn't have. And they need to continue to fund building out real technology things. But the public market's just not the capital for that. And so there's quite a lot of that going on right now. In fact, that would actually be a really interesting thing to look at in the next year, which is, did we have more things go private just in sheer volume than went public over the next 12 months? Like that's like going to be an interesting thing to look at a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of barriers to all deals now, including sort of interest rates, M&A, regulation. But I think that will be a pattern. I want to make sure we get to some of our other topics. So I think on this one, Britt was certainly correct in predicting a change in the IPO landscape. I think in the big context, it doesn't seem like it's going to be roaring in any way, and that has pretty fundamental implications for startups, what kinds of companies get built, how they get built, et cetera. Probably which are good and healthy, right? Which easily could be. But in terms of ringing, Dave, you brought up a great point. Like a lot of these companies were funded with expectations of a different kind of outcome. So I think there's more to come there. I want to pick up the more or less Sam Altman point here. So clearly, OpenAI, this is a great time for Sam to actually walk off the pod. Look, this is how much he loves this topic. Oh, he's back. Clearly, the rise of OpenAI, the management turmoil of OpenAI, been a huge topic on this pod. It's funny, my personal views continue to very frequently change about OpenAI on so many different dimensions, because I think that it's clear they've been a leader in the foundation model layer of the technology. And I think it's also clear there will be many leaders. What also is a bit surprising to me is that revenue is really ramping there. And I think while there are very big picture questions around AI as a business and where that business value flows, OpenAI has gotten more traction in the business world and on the revenue side and enterprise than I thought it would, which is interesting and surprising to me. But it's still, I think, against this backdrop of incredible uncertainty over, how it competes with the huge players and all the things we've talked about, even just technology, right? The next breakthrough could come from anywhere, and where does that put it? But I think I probably underestimated OpenAI from a near-term business revenue potential going back 12 months. And that's sort of top of mind for me looking at them going forward.
Was this more or less OpenAI or more or less Sam Altman?
Well, I like to make it OpenAI. I guess on the Sam Altman point, because I think we've talked about both. I'm surprised, but not surprised that he has turned this coup into just sort of like, there's no question that he is more powerful in every single dimension in terms of not only running OpenAI, but kind of the future of this technology and all the other companies he wants to build. And so, if you're pro Sam Altman, you would think that's a very good thing. I think maybe power should be more distributed. I think it's very likely, we've reported they're talking about converting to a B Corp, which is a company, which would essentially completely liberate him from the nonprofit kind of overhang and the issues that had that board boot him. I guess in terms of a prediction, maybe I would have thought that he would have been a little more depowered coming out of this crisis. But if you look at kind of the march of technology and these powerful founders and leaders, it probably does swing in the direction of getting more power. So maybe this isn't surprising. But
yeah, well, I would agree with you. I've been impressed with Sam Altman. I feel like in stepping back in, he's had to clean up shop, right? He replaced the board. Ilya left. He hired a bunch of new executives. He's potentially turning it into a B Corp. Yes, all that's good. It feels like it's getting into more of a status
Is it
quo.
all good?
Well, I think that it's
You guys, this is interesting. I'm going to enjoy looking back at the episodes from 6 months ago to now and holding you guys on this.
okay. I'm not done yet. So I think he's gotten it into status quo, continue to grow the company. And I agree with you, Jess. It's surprising to me how well they've done. I will say on the more or less open AI front, I'm still dubious on who wins out. I mean, just today we saw Amazon is now developing its own competitive threat to ChatGPT, and it hit a $2 trillion market cap because of this news and all of this stuff. And, I just continue to believe it's going to be a messy competitive game at the top where these things, are sort of disposable potentially. So I'm not sure the long term on OpenAI, but I do think Sam Altman's proven to be more than I expected.
So I have to clarify my position, Sam. I am more bullish than I was, which isn't necessarily very bullish on the business. So what surprised me is there's more business momentum. I think Sam consolidating power is not, I definitely don't think that's a good thing. I think if we're looking at would I have predicted that he would have come out of that, having basically, consolidated power, that wasn't certain to me. But I think as a business, there's more traction than I thought. And it's interesting, Britt, because I think I agree with you. There's competition from all corners, kind of in theory. But you guys probably talk to developers way more than I do because you're considering funding them. And you talk to any developer about AI, OpenAI is 90% market share, right? And then you ask why. And I will say, oh, but Google's a smart company. Gemini answers my queries pretty well. What is it? And then they run off 10 reasons that OpenAI is leaps and bounds ahead in really critical API things, including, things I'm not technical enough to understand, but even how you can prompt data out of the system and use it, so on and so forth. It's interesting because competition isn't going away. And I think you'll be able to, many different entities will get to goodish large language models and so forth. Then of course there's everything beyond large language models. And I think I have come around in the past year to think large language models are way more limited in their functionality than everyone would like us to think. But I mean, you can't overlook the market position that isn't just marketing, but is actually sales and developer penetration. The second one, by the way, if you ask, is Anthropic and Claude, which is really interesting. So anyway, Sam, over to you. I rant.
Well, I'm curious. I want to go last. Dave, what's your take on all this?
Oh, you want to be able to just smudge everyone.
Drop
up.
the hammer. All right. Yeah, here we go.
No, I want to play cleanup on this one.
No, I want to play cleanup.
Okay, together. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
I guess, jumping off from where you were, Jess, it's interesting. The developer story that you articulated is right. The APIs are superior. Everyone's using them. They are running the best developer program in the game. Now, that being said, a lot of what's being built is also being destroyed by each subsequent new version of the model. I mean, we just did 2 episodes on what should you build. And in both cases, we had extremely smart people giving their ideas about what to build. And there's still this question about, well, I'm not totally sure what you should build. That's like this underlying point that comes across even when talking to the smartest people working on this stuff. I mean, Britt and I were at a dinner last night with a bunch of people from the AI world. I probably shouldn't name names, but there were some really, in particular, one person that was there is working on one of the core technologies at OpenAI. And I was kind of taken aback at how far in the future some of the use cases that people think are going to be possible in a month, they're not going to be possible in a month. It's going to be particularly around video and whatnot. This stuff is years away in terms of being a viable case that both consumers and developers are going to be able to use, right? I think I saw today that there was a commercial for Toys R Us done by Sora, for example. It's super clear that this stuff takes forever to render right now. And that in order for this to be something that consumers use to edit a 1-minute video in a very short time period, we're talking years before that's going to be real. And so I continue to be very skeptical, I guess, about what use cases are possible today and which ones are possible over what timeline. That conversation still really bugs me. And I guess I'll take it into one other area, which we talked about, I think, around the kerfuffle with Sam Altman, which is this whole AGI thing. Just drives me crazy.
We killed it. You do not hear that word, and not we. But
we killed it. No, let's take credit for it, Jess.
Okay. We killed it. It is amazing to me how much it's fallen out of the Silicon Valley vernacular.
I'm happy to hear you say that because I'm still extreme less on this.
Although, is super intelligence AGI? Because that's what has replaced it.
I don't know what it is, but I think something you said earlier, Jess, and it does seem to be becoming part of the everyday conversation, which is that LLMs are great and they have a bunch of use cases that are really fantastic and interesting. And yes, they are actually moving us forward, as a species in a way that's really great. And I thought Vinod actually said it quite eloquently, which is this is just a great new way to interact with computers. You can now talk to computers with language and voice, and they do things for you. And that's a really huge leap forward, actually. It's enabling a lot of productivity in a bunch of ways that's pretty great. But this is not some insane super intelligence we're all going to become subservient to, or is going to destroy humanity, or is going to become a god, or that we're going to upload ourselves into. I still am very interested in that part of this conversation and how far ahead of its skis it's become. And I'm happy to hear you say you think it's ramping down, because I'm just I'm wary of the religious nature of it and how it's become this new secular theology in Silicon Valley that people are kind of looking to fill the voids of their big questions about, whether or not we have souls and whether or not, what the big questions are in humanity. So anyway, that's a thing that I guess I'm still thinking a lot about. And I hope that we can stay focused on where we are in this technology cycle and what we can use this technology to do today and what might be possible over reasonable real timelines. And we can get out of a little bit of this religious undertone of fear this God that is going to destroy us all and then therefore give us all the money to make sure that it doesn't, right? Let's just have a technology conversation about this and build some amazing stuff and build some great businesses and tools for people and have some fun, It doesn't have to be this big religious thing. Anyway.
I believe it was Feel the AGI was the chant. Okay, Sam, you can clean up, but you got to do it short because we got to keep it moving.
So look, I mean, just picking up on what Dave was saying, I think we have to remember that a year ago, the debate we started having on OpenAI was about Sam Altman going to DC, fear mongering AGI, safety. This technology is so powerful and dangerous, and you should regulate us, and this whole narrative, right? And with due respect to some serious people who are working on like the long term risks around AI, which are real and like worth spending time on and money on in some pockets. I mean, I think for me, the narrative was that, which I'm incredibly skeptical of on a short term timeline, and I thought it was very cynical of Sam to be marketing it that way, right? Through this conversation, around him getting thrown out because the organization was set up with that mission, right? And to protect against that mission, with AGI, and then OpenAI growing into like a pretty regular way as of today, enterprise and consumer business, right? And so there's been like, this year has been a huge year of narrative shift, right? And I think if you're more or less Sam Altman, the cult style, right, seems like it's gone to the background. Sam Altman, the very, very good capital raiser, has come to the foreground. And like, he is good at raising capital. There's no question about that. And then there's the OpenAI story itself, where it's like, on one hand, I actually have been starting to build some demo products with it. Like, there are places where I'm like, this does work. There are some interesting things to explore around it. But as Dave said, no one has really good product answers yet of how you make money or build really different things versus it just being yet another cloud service. If it's yet another cloud service, it's fine. Accenture makes some money on it and ripping out some customer service, fine. It's a thing a lot of people arms deal, fine. OpenAI might be so big that they get a seat at the table versus the big companies because they've done a great job branding, fine. But it's just like,
I think they've done a good job with the technology too, right? Like,
it's fine. It's fine. I mean, like, is it the thing you use? Yeah, but I think actually, to Dave's point, it's actually less about the real technology and more that like they built clean APIs and got them deployed everywhere. So like, if you're like going on the internet and you're in Retool or you're using Zapier or whatever the fuck you're going to use to like implement this stuff, it's just easier to get.
It's like Stripe. Stripe is the right analogy, right? Like, there's lots of ways to do what Stripe does, but their APIs are just cleaner and more awesome.
Well,
so everybody
it's
uses
funny
it.
because it's not even that hard. Like, what they got right was basic auth.
Huge
right?
business.
Like, it's like hilarious because like this goes back to the whole thing. It's like this. I think sometimes big companies get this really wrong, and like OpenAI, actually, to your point about Stripe, kind of gets it because they kind of have a little more startup DNA. Is like your auth scheme really matters. Right?
Totally.
Because like people fucking around like don't want to deal with your crazy auth schemes or like figuring out how to use your shit through 15 windows in an Amazon console. It's like, how about you just give me
or like GCP console. It's so hard to use Gemini's API.
That's what someone was telling. I'm surprised.
Totally.
It's not even about the technology. Like, if someone else had like a simpler interface, you'd get a lot of developer adoption.
Absolutely.
But why don't you think that still is possible with Apple and Amazon and everybody else?
You know what it really comes down to, Britt, is those companies are not tooled to think that way. They have different security.
Yeah.
And their point is, but their whole mentality is all that really matters is big enterprise because that's who moves dollars, right? And so big enterprise don't give a fuck about this, right? In fact, they don't want a basic auth key because it's kind of dirty, right? It's like kind of like not the way, it's like not that great, right? From a security perspective. But then all the little developers or people who are fucking around are going to use the simplest thing they can get their hands on. And so I think that's the irony of like, if you think about the thing that OpenAI has ironically gotten right in the last year is they've like gotten right the like thrust to weight of experimentation. Right?
Yeah. But Sam, this isn't it's funny. It's the same thing with consumer interfaces. The simplest, most elegant interface always wins, right? And this is a very simple parable for developer APIs, right? Like, it always happens. I think back to like Heroku, right? Where like James Lindenbaum just nailed it by giving people this like one simple API, bam, you can experiment. It's super easy, right? Like, people can have an idea and boom, have it up and running. Like, this isn't rocket science.
The flip side, though, is that Heroku was like, what, it was like a $600 million acquisition or something. Like, it wasn't a great financial outcome or really the winner of the space. The winner of the space was the enterprise grade stuff, right? And so I think this is kind of the thing of like, you and I like Heroku. The startup world likes it. If you're going to build something, they have great mind share because like everyone's used to fucking around with it. And like, that's worth something, right? When you say like, more or less Sam Altman, it's like, look, more in that he's come off of the narrative that drove me nuts, even though he leveraged it and like very cynically leveraged it in my mind, and is kind of just now like a money raiser, which is like a much more like meh on. I think he weathered a hell of a storm politically. Good for him, but like I would say like equal on Sam Altman. But then on OpenAI, I'm like, it's kind of the same thing. It's like they've weathered it, but they haven't clearly won anything.
Fair.
Okay, I think we know where we all stand. And we'll be talking about it next year and this year. Okay, Sam and Dave, you're up for picking a topic.
Go ahead, Sam.
No, after you, Dave.
I know. I think I know which one's coming.
What am I picking, Britt?
Are you going to pick Threads or Vision Pro?
Oh. I don't know which topic to go with. Let's see.
Dave, there's one so close to your heart. Just do it.
All right, I'm going to go with the Threads, TikTok, sort of. I think we can combine the more or less Threads, more or less TikTok. And Actually, I saw a piece today on YouTube and the sheer scale of YouTube's growth over the last year.
Oh, so, I'm long YouTube. Big YouTube
So fan. I think that's where I want to start on this one.
Okay. So what has changed around your thinking around Threads and TikTok?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. You got
Oh, well, I mean, this is simple. I just don't use Threads. Like I just don't use it anymore. Period. I haven't opened it in 3 months.
Why not?
It's just, I don't know. I was actually thinking about it last night. I didn't know we were going to talk about this today. And I actually opened it up and I was looking at when the last time was that I posted. And it was actually a while ago. It was when we got in the top 10 for the podcast, which is quite a long time ago. And I actually don't know. I just don't find it that useful or good. Like there's just not much going on in there every time I open it. And I don't know. Like I don't know where it went. And it was interesting, even going back in time to this time last year, I was very excited about it. And I was looking at my posts back then and I had this like optimism about the product and how it felt in that time period. But that feeling changed pretty dramatically. And I was posting about it as it was on its run up. And I think it's this like classic thing. And it almost goes back to one of the things when I built Path that I was really interested in was just this thing that happens with social media systems where there's like a golden moment where they feel really amazing. Like you're meeting a bunch of new people, there's new voices, you're seeing new voices, conversations that you're not seeing normally are showing up in your feed and you're getting pulled into things. And just like Clubhouse felt like that for a minute. And then one of two things seems to happen. Either it just doesn't work out and the system maintains no engagement and people just move on. It's like a club that was hot for a minute and then nobody goes to the club anymore. Or the other thing that happens, and this seems to happen with Meta's assets, it gets turned into this engagement machine that just brings the entire sort of social media conversation to bear and just destroys the magic of kind of a community in favor of, I guess, what you would call the creator economy or whatever it is that's going on in the world with this. And it's just like not that fun anymore. And so you just stop using it. And then on the other hand, you've got, I guess we could talk about these other things like TikTok and YouTube, but like YouTube seems to have this like perpetual ability to become more and different versions of itself, which I'm kind of interested in the magic. Like I don't totally know how they do it down there. It's pretty impressive. And even doing this podcast, it's so interesting how my attention has shifted from the Spotify platforms to paying attention to YouTube a lot more. And I guess maybe what that is that YouTube's quite good at the creator tools. They're definitely superior at the creator tools. Maybe it comes back to this last conversation we were having about OpenAI. Like the YouTube creator tools are really good. And the feeling that you have being a creator on YouTube is vastly superior to the other platforms. And so maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Those are some opening thoughts.
I think on the Threads thing, there's again, like we were all excited about it. Again, like a year ago, a year's a long time. Like this was like peak Elon insanity Twitter moment type stuff. And like everyone was like, what's the outlet? It's perfectly launched in a lot of ways. But even then, I think the question we asked from day one was, there's this big open question, which is, can you bootstrap a new graph off of the Instagram graph with a different medium and have it be good? Or is like the people you follow on, Instagram sufficiently different set of people that like you don't really want to hear the text thoughts from them, right? Yep. And like, there's an interesting mix of friends from the early days on Instagram versus kind of more professional followers and I think, look, on one hand, it does seem big. I still post to it. I kind of cross post to it. Like I'm not like very active in it, but I kind of post on Twitter and then we'll repost the same thing on LinkedIn now and Threads as just like other places. Every once in a while, something gets popular on Threads or something gets popular on LinkedIn, but it's just like a different pocket. I do think the answer though is like, it turns out that, inorganically bootstrapped social media is not like an instant win, right? Like, so I don't know. I think Threads is like fine. I'm not like, I think there was a moment where you're like, oh my God, this is the text medium we're looking for. I think it's another text medium.
You know what's interesting? Just to say one thing off Sam's comment about LinkedIn. I was thinking about it last week, and Sam, I know you've said this a few times, but it's so impressive to me how relevant LinkedIn has become in terms of their feed and all of this stuff. Like, LinkedIn could very well be totally irrelevant today in this world, right? Like there are other social media products from the same era that are totally irrelevant, but LinkedIn has somehow increased its relevance, which is, I think, impressive. Just as a product person, like the fact that they figured that out is like very interesting.
Well, I think by being extremely uninnovative. Like I think the reality is like LinkedIn has survived and thrived in the gutter because they they've kind of like done obvious shit. They haven't taken any risks. Right. But they've been around forever and they've kind of just grinded out a thing that a lot of people like as an alternative to Facebook and Twitter. Right?
I don't know, Sam. They've got LinkedIn games now. That was a risk.
That's true. I don't think they were in the gutter. I think they're an example of knowing your audience, knowing your product.
Going.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what it is? LinkedIn is like extremely normcore. Right? And
totally.
From a normcore perspective, they've done well. Like just knowing that they're normcore and being normcore, but continuing to do their thing.
What I love about LinkedIn's newest feature is they're using AI to prompt you of what you should comment on a post, which just makes my commenting on posts way easier. Like Instagram should definitely do this.
Well, Facebook has done this. I mean, to me, the interesting thing that's gone on in social media among the Threads world, I don't know if you guys feel this, is to me, I used to cross-post more text to Facebook, and that was getting like not that much engagement. And so I do wonder, not broadly, I don't think it would show up in the big picture numbers because Threads is too small. But I am kind of curious at like people like us who've been on these networks forever, how much Threads has cannibalized Facebook posting, right? And like how that kind of played out.
I don't know. It seems generational.
Facebook was already dead to me when Threads launched, so it's like it just didn't matter.
But also, can I just say one thing? Like,
I never use it. I don't log into it. I never open it.
Does this mean like we're like super pessimistic about any new social apps? Like if we saw Be Real launch in fall, Lemonade, like the ByteDance thing. Like
only only VCs use those. I never touch these things. I just want to be on record.
Well, they had a moment. All of these things had moments, and then they've like kind of fallen off for the wayside.
Like, there's a lot of content that's fashion, and but to cross the line from being fashion into like a network is just really hard. And like it's not clear to me that since basically the messenger graphs of various sorts and like Instagram, whether we've had a network actually born, right? Like, or whether it's just all content. And like, there's been a line I think is more and more true. We talked about it a year ago. I think it's certainly true now. Is like, you kind of just need to drop the word social from social media. It's just media. Right. And like, I think that's, and like, maybe that's what YouTube has gotten right.
Until Dave builds his next company. But okay.
I would argue, I mean, Sam, I think you're really right. I would argue that the year of 2024 was like the year that social media became just media. Like it's no longer like this social is dead. Like it's all just media now.
Okay. Jess wants to get in though.
I don't have a lot to add to this. I don't use Threads, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad sign for Threads. I mean, they seem to have a community of people, and I know a lot of journalists who really use it actively. But, it's always been an interesting side project, and that's kind of what it will be. I think just as a point, LinkedIn is like a B2B enterprise data company too. Like, I mean, if you ever checked your LinkedIn recruiting bills, don't. It's really, really
Totally.
expensive. And that's a
Really
big,
expensive.
it's just important to have a completely different business model than everyone else here. I'm kind of curious because it's something I wrestle with and don't have an answer. Like, how much posting on social media matters to me anymore. I mean, it does. And I do it a lot. And I do it with an intention to promote something related to the information or to connect over like a hobby I'm really excited about and meet other people excited about it. But I think I'd be okay if it went away. And I'm just wondering, like, if we all kind of feel that way, which is sort of
I've actually gotten a lot of pitches recently for companies, but we haven't invested in this, but like companies that help you downplay your time on social, like better screen time apps. I think it's the collective nature of everyone to want to reduce our time spent on social media.
Okay, Sam, you can rebut this.
I was one of the first very few Facebook users. Before that, I was on 6 Degrees and all this shit. And I've been on social media. I'm still very low on social media. I think Instagram's super fun. I enjoy posting to it. And just for my own, there are two purposes of me. One is like a nice little journal of my life. And then two, I like the feedback from friends and family and be able to share that stuff. I think it's like really powerful. And I don't really care about the noise. And candidly, like I find a lot of value business-wise and otherwise in kind of putting out ideas and getting back better ideas from other people on things like Twitter and Threads to a little bit and things like that. So I'm still very long human-to-human connection in a lot of forms. I just think that there is a problem right now where the vast majority, when you put billions of people on a platform, most people want a lean-back consumption experience. Most people want media. Like, they're not actively engaged in et cetera. There are communities that are engaged in it, right? And so I think that maybe that is the thing they kind of hone in on is like social media. If you say all of media consumption is social media and social media mean the same thing, it gets very muddled and I think can be very disengaging in a lot of ways. But I don't know. I'm still continue to be extremely long the power of connecting people with people. And I find a lot of value in it.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I was talking a lot about this week with Britt and some of our partners here was that this like phenomenon that's going on right now where like 110,000 people showed up to a George Strait concert last week, or that Chappelle Roan went from, a very small number of streams to 20 million streams in less than 12 months, or like Zach Bryan is selling out entire stadiums in a very short period of time. There's very clearly this like mass collective desire to connect to other humans at very large scale in these like stadium level contexts that's far beyond what was going on years ago. And I don't think you can like separate that from social media's power in activating these fandoms to be that scale, right? Like I think that it would be actually hard to like separate those two things. Like you can call it, well, we're all so bored of our phones and we're so numbed by all of this media and social media that we want to be in person and experience these mass collective events, which started with Taylor Swift, but now it's like it's downstream in all kinds of different genres. But I don't think you can separate it from that social media is the thing driving these fandoms to this scale. And like that's like a very interesting thing.
People just want to like, I mean, I think they go back to like to your point about it is core at its core social media is like people just want to find things and memes to like have connective tissue to other people, right? It's not Hollywood movies anymore, right? It's not like, oh, favorite movie quotes, right? Things like that. It's like people just randomly somewhat picking up or like, whether it's GME or whatever, just like deciding that there's a thing at the moment that they're going to be able to use as like a framework, a medium for connecting. Because fundamentally, I think the big problem is humans want to connect with each other and being original is extremely expensive. Like it's just hard, right? And like and risky and things like that. So most people want to like be meme followers as a way to have something to talk about with their friends.
Totally.
Right?
Let's hear Britt's final take on the threads. We talked less about TikTok and then we've got to get to our final topic.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Instagram will continue to play around with integrating it into other things. Interesting point Sam made about cannibalizing Facebook, maybe. I agree with where Sam was headed at. We thought the moment of time would be perfect if Elon really messed up the Twitter to X transition, but I don't think many people left X. And so I've been really surprised to see how that's still the
I think some advertisers left, but not some users.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think we thought it would be more cannibalized by Threads than it was. So yeah, I'm not long on Threads, but I also really like the point about media, not social media.
I think I was in the camp of it wasn't going to kill Twitter, but it would be more, right? I think that's kind of what's played out, right?
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, the Sam Altman Elon thing, I will just call out and we're going to move on, is this is kind of, I think the story of the year is there's a story, if you go before last year, there's a story of like tech leaders and their ability to like weather storms. Like all the chatter doesn't really fucking matter. Like even the legal stuff doesn't matter. You just kind of do your thing and keep plowing ahead, right? And I think the story of the last year since we started working on this pod is more of just plow ahead. It's all noise. Right. And like you can feel how you want about that, what's right, what's wrong, copyright and AI and all that stuff. But the reality is like these things just chug along, whether it's Donald Trump getting in, or whatever. Right. And I think that's like an interesting cultural moment in history where they just feel, especially for, people, whether it's Altman or Musk or Elon or whatever, it's just, there really aren't, you can be right, you can be wrong, you just keep moving forward.
Okay, last topic, Sam. Pick it for us.
I mean, I don't have a great one to pick, but I just want to just for fun as a short last one, mostly to make fun of Dave. Vision Pro.
I thought you were going to go with Tavis. I'm bummed, but okay, we can talk about
Vision
that.
Pro. I mean, like, look, I blame Casey Neistat because I love Casey, and when Casey was losing his mind about how good the Vision Pro was, I went out and just bought one basically on his recommendation. But there was this like, oh my God, they cracked it. Apple's great. And like, that might be the least used device in the history of the world.
The information is reported they're not even working on the next version of it.
No, there are less used things.
I agree.
Give it some credit.
The clips, the AI pins are even less used.
Give it some credit. Come on.
I think, Sam, you're a minute used per dollar spent or something. There's a metric that would.
Yeah, I was saying that I think the Vision Pro is almost certainly the most expensive device per minute used in history, right? Because you think about it, like we all bought them. They cost $3,000.
Okay, but why? Let's explore this in brief. Why? Did we just want to believe? Are we stupid? What happened?
Yes.
Well, we think Apple produces really high quality hardware and technology, and that this is a category everyone's been paying attention to for many years, and seems reasonable to believe that there's a new type of sort of media experience to be had, and that we don't just want to like stare at boxes in front of our face for a long time. But I think the form factor has a lot to do with this still. Dave and I were debating this earlier this week. If it really were as simple, and I'm not saying this is technologically feasible right now, to embed Vision Pro into normal off-the-shelf kind of Ray-Ban glasses or, something that you would wear really lightly on your face, would that change your opinion on it? Would that change adoption? And what are all the other, especially I continue to believe like professional use cases, like home tours for real estate clients and like surgery and all kinds of ways that you can utilize this.
That's what people say when the consumer things don't work. This is the classic, oh, it's B2C. Oh, no, it's not. It's B2B. Oh, no, it's
I've always said it though. I mean, I think the movie experience is like the only other use case that people have really found valuable. It's just like on an airplane or whatever.
To jump in on this and take some credit for my position back then. I don't have my transcript in front of me, but I do remember saying this was the Apple Vision Pro. This was positioned as a developer device. It's a pro device. It's not a consumer device. And so was it successful on that vector is the question, in my opinion. Like this was never supposed to be a consumer device. And so did it inspired developers to build spatial computing experiences? Did it show us all a vision of spatial computing that was compelling?
I don't know, Dave. I think you're right in that it was tailored to very specific use cases, but like there's no way that this is, the amount spent on marketing, the amount spent on development. I don't.
For a hot second, this was Tim's legacy.
Tim Cook wore it on the cover of Vanity Fair, right?
Yeah. Well, but I was going to say, look, I think what I was going to say, what I'm more on over the year, to Britt's point about form factor, everyone's wearing the Meta Ray-Bans. They're everywhere, right? And so you think about it, it's like, what is that? It's like a camera on your face. And people are like, well, I like the...
I don't know that I've seen one in the wild. So I agree it's a cool product but I'm like, is everyone really wearing them? Where are you seeing it? Like,
are you kidding? At the conference you and I were at, like I saw 10 people wearing them out of like 150.
Okay.
No, that's a lot, right? Like I've seen them shockingly in the wild. It's been like surprising to me in the last year. And I do think like it is an interesting question about like, what you're more or less on. I think like, I don't know. I am very bearish short term on this stuff, but that has been one glimmer of hope I've seen.
Yeah, Sam, I would definitely agree. Like, I also think that there was a wholesale rejection, like a wholesale cultural rejection of this entire idea. Like, I think that people experienced both the Meta Quest and the Vision Pro, and they were just like, hard no, I do not want this. Like, this is not the future I want to be a part of.
Except for teens that are playing games on them. I don't know. I think it's more
but that's games. But where I was going with my point is that I think you're right about the Ray-Bans. And this was Britt's point, that use case, and I actually had a use case last week where I actually haven't bought the new Ray-Bans. I've been meaning to. I know that they're good. I have the originals.
Me too.
And they've been great. But I've been meaning to get the new ones. And I had a use case last week where I really wished I would have had them. And after it was over, I was like, oh, man, I should have had them. That was perfect. And so I do think that the sunglasses, glasses use case is super clearly the right future of this, and how that plays out, who knows?
We had an interview with the CEO of Luxottica, right? The company that Meta partners with, and we were talking about all the other partnerships having the work. So, okay, something to look forward to. Well, we should wrap because we've given the listeners a lot. I think we can circle back to the year in the PCC because I think it probably culminated with the Taylor Travis being on stage together. If we had to pick a high point at the Eras Tour, so good. But I don't know. Listening to this, I think there have been a tremendous number of interesting issues. So good job. We can pat ourselves on the back. But also, I don't know. I'm gearing up. I think the news is going to keep on coming. We also
the news and the special guests.
And the special guests. Send us raise your hand. Who doesn't want to be a fifth wheel? We'd love that. I also think we need to talk about a year in company ideas we had that probably still have not come to fruition yet. So that maybe could be a sequel to this, but it has been 52 weeks of some good to not so good to excellent product ideas. And with that, let's thank the listeners again for another great week. We appreciate the listen, the share, the review, all of those things that help grow a podcast empire. And we'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.